Hello once again, I'm Cosmic, and on this episode of Early Access Examination we're going to be taking a look at an action RPG, Victor Vran, which is in development by Haemimont Games. Now Haemimont themselves are a Bulgarian developer who have worked on such titles as Tropico 5, Omerta City of Gangsters and The First Templar. Victor Vran is set in a gothic fantasy universe where you essentially play a demon hunter. Now the setting, as you can tell, has a very strong Van Helsing theme to it, and that runs throughout the game. In essence, Victor Vran is an isometric ARPG that focuses on player skill as well as the loot and the character builds. Your ability to dodge, roll and jump out of the way of attacks is as important as the damage stats of your swords. The game's controls work well on both a controller and mouse and keyboard. I personally found that the controller was the best to use, as the thumbsticks come in handy for 360-degree movement and dodging effectively. The game's controls work very similar to the console versions of Torchlight 2 and in some aspects Diablo 3. Your character can have two weapons equipped at any one time and can seamlessly switch in between the two. Each weapon has its own type and own abilities, which vary in their effect. Shotguns, for example, have pushback AoE abilities, whereas a sword has an ability to stun. The combat will appeal to hack and slash fans. Overall, the combat so far has been very fluid, and the speed of it has actually pretty impressed me thus far in early access. It's nice to have an ARPG that allows you to jump and perform aerial to ground attacks. In fact, this kind of jumping mechanic in the game is incorporated in points in the level design, particularly in the finding of secret areas. The freedom of movement in the game is fun, and while some spells and weapons do require you to be rooted for at least a time, for the most part you're always on the move, either attacking or dodging. Your character will have a selection of powerful spells known as demon powers that can be used at a cost of your overdrive meter. You can only equip a few of these spells at a time, but keep others in your inventory. There are a variety of demon powers, such as an AoE meteor storm or a health replenishing vampiric aura. Demon spells are very useful for getting out of tight situations, but I would have liked a more engaging magic system that didn't require you to use other weapons. I mean, for example, you can go through the game with just, ranged or melee, but you cannot go through the game just being magic, and I would have preferred that they had a magic system in play where I could have chosen magic as a preferred stance of combat rather than relying on the other two and then just finishing off groups of enemies with magic. While the combat does give decent feedback and the mix of ranged and melee weapons available is ever increasing, it does have the hack and slash flaw of being quite repetitive. This inbuilt repetitiveness is somewhat dampened by the large variety of enemies and their tactics. Boss battles in particular have unique mechanics and present a good challenge, though some of the enemy mechanics can be frustrating, such as undead enemies who will keep resurrecting until they are killed with an overkill hit. I think for me personally, what would make combat more interesting is the addition of combos in some form, whether it be having combos that use the current abilities, or even multi-weapon combos where you could switch mid-attack to your other weapons and continue attacking to perform quite an impressive combo. I feel that combos would really add some depth to the combat and thus add enjoyment to the overall game. But as I said, it is a more hack and slash, and people do like hack and slash. I just feel that the game's combat would have benefited from some combos in some form. So far in the early access build, there are quite a few areas and dungeons open to you. Each area and subsequent dungeons have main objectives and side challenges which make the game more interesting. The game implements a hex system also, where you can turn off and on a hex, which will have an effect on something such as enemy damage, or perhaps it's going to deplete your health over time. Area challenges often incorporate hexes. For example, a dungeon I went to asked me to turn on a hex that would continually drain my health, and these hexes add a good amount of difficulty and fun to the game. It is quite it does get the blood pumping and the adrenaline flowing when you're trying to complete a dungeon on a time because you know your health is going down. Hex challenges stop the game essentially from getting stale in parts, and they do allow you to reap great rewards for the risk that you take. Character progression in Victor Vran is fairly simple and sadly doesn't leave much up to the player. As you level up, you'll of course get stronger. However, any and all statistical changes are automatic, and you have no real depth in customization as you gain levels. What you do have is control over destiny cards, which are cards that you can equip on the inventory screen that have different statistical effects, such as plus 300 health or 30% increased damage with swords, etc, etc. You can only equip a couple of destiny cards at a time, and you do get them from both leveling up and looting. The rarer destiny cards will have more powerful effects and usually come from bosses or champion monsters. Leveling up also currently unlocks new armor, weapons and demon spells. For me, I hope they change the leveling up system in the full release to make it more meaningful in terms of both customization and overall depth. While other similar games like Torchlight, Diablo, etc. also have a standoff leveling system, what they do have is extensive loot mechanics, and this is where I feel Victor Vran as of yet does not. Sure, there is plenty of weapons and loot, but not on the scale of similar games in the genre, which can make the whole experience of Victor Vran feel oversimplified. Visually, the game is very pleasing, and everything from character models to leather detail is vibrant to look at. The art style that the developers went with has allowed everything from spell effects to lighting to look colourful and good. Each environment has a dark gothic theme, to which reinforces the Van Helsing theme. The soundtrack to the game provides some good, dark, tense atmosphere. However, it is not particularly outstanding in any respect, but it's solid and does the job. One thing I do like is that the developers actually have been very open during the development, providing a clear development roadmap on the front page of the Steam page, allowing customers to see what is planned and when it will be delivered. I have to give them credit for that, and it's something that not only would I like to see other developers on Early Access doing, but I think it should be a requirement for using the service. The game has just recently launched the multiplayer component, which will allow online co-op, which I think is a huge benefit to the game. ARPGs in general are one of the only genres where co-op modes are not only work well, but they can provide huge benefits and personal enjoyment. Now, while the early access build is stable and it has been better than most early access games, it still has its fair share of bugs. I have not encountered anything game-breaking in my time with the game. It's just usually a few graphical glitches or where the enemies completely freeze. In my opinion, Victor Vran is on its way to becoming a very solid ARPG. Now, while I would personally like to see more exotic locales, as well as a lot more lootable items, the core mechanics of the game, while simplistic, are fun and addictive. If the developers continue to play to the game's strengths, such as adding to the multi-layer levels, all the while improving the game's weakest points, I could see this game being a huge hit with ARPG fans. As for whether or not it's worth buying in early access, for me personally it isn't, because there's no story of the game in there yet, because they're saving that for full release. However, come full release, from what I've seen thus far and from what I've played thus far, I certainly would buy it at full release. But if you have a friend to play co-op with, I can certainly see you getting your value for money buying it in early access. But again, it's down to your personal preference on whether you want to wait for the full release or buy it now and still get the full release when it comes out. Overall though, Victor Vran is a very solid ARPG. It is one of the best ones I've played in quite a while. Its hack and slash mechanics, while repetitive, are fun and somewhat addictive, and it's got a nice overall style and tone to it, and it's pretty well built. So that's Victor Vran. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Do like, subscribe and leave a comment, and I will see you next time.